Hey folks, welcome back to the Carl Zahn Show, episode 25, I believe. So a bit of a milestone episode here, and naturally lots of stuff to talk about this week. Before we get going, please hit the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. Trying to grow the channel, so everything you do helps, and feel free to comment. Once again, we're doing, every now and then we do a unique show, which I call No Notes, No Pants. And that is what we're doing today. It's going to complete free flow. And I don't believe, I'm pretty sure everything's covered under here. So you can see I have no notes. The no pants thing, I'm going to leave to your imagination. And speaking of imagination, what a week or so we have had here in the political landscape. So the Democratic National Convention has wrapped up. Big time out there in Chicago. Lots of pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protesters, but they did manage to keep that pretty well contained. Pretty interesting week, and one of the things that I thought was most fascinating about the DNC is that they had like a big medical van outside the arena there where they were offering free abortions and free hysterectomies, which I thought was a little odd and maybe a little bit creepy. I also heard, and I don't know if it's unsubstantiated, but I heard that they had a gender reassignment surgery van that was going to be there, but they had a flat tire in Moline and were not able to get there in time. So that was unfortunate because I think a lot of the people were looking forward to, a week in Chicago, Democratic convention, maybe an abortion, maybe a hysterectomy, maybe a little gender reassignment surgery. So really interesting time. And this is, of course, the new Democratic Party, which brings me to my next point, which is obviously RFK Jr., dropped a big bombshell yesterday, made an announcement, kind of interesting that he is suspending his campaign but not terminating it. His name will remain on the ballot in all the states where he was able to get on the ballot, with the exception of the swing states. So that's interesting. So he wants to stay. He's suspending his campaign, not terminating it, but then he's not going to have his name on the ballot in the swing states because, well, they're swing states, and I guess he wants his name not to pollute the votes there. So naturally, there's all kinds of back and forth about how this helps Trump or doesn't help Trump. How much damage does it do to the Harris campaign? My feeling is I don't think it helps Trump immensely. I think it will make a difference. I don't know that it hurts Democrats immensely, to tell you the truth. But I do give RFK a lot of credit for kind of speaking truth to power, to use a worn-out phrase, but outlining that this new Democratic Party is not the party of his uncle, JFK, and his dad, Bobby Kennedy, both of whom everyone knows were assassinated. And, RFK went right down the list of all the reasons and all the, I guess his motivation behind his move here to essentially divorce himself from the Democratic Party. So that's a pretty huge deal if you think of the Kennedy empire and what that means and how it's just kind of synonymous with the Democratic Party. You think Kennedy family. So really interesting move on RFK part. I did watch his full 45-minute or so speech yesterday where he talked about all the reasons that he was doing this, and it was pretty emotional at the end. He was openly weeping, and I get that. A very emotional moment while you thank all your volunteers, you thank all the people who work so hard for you. Always emotional. I can understand that for anybody when you finally have to suspend a campaign and accept the reality of your numbers and so forth. But I think also behind that was Kennedy made it known quite some time ago that his siblings had basically divorced themselves from him because when he left the Democratic Party, became a registered independent and ran on that third-party ticket, that his siblings just kind of severed their relationship with him. And I think yesterday what I saw was, and he mentioned that beyond just the relationship with his siblings, his support of Trump, and again, that's kind of stopping short of an endorsement, but he did say he was going to support Trump. But he did mention in that this had caused some pretty heavy division between his wife and his children. And I think he has 7 kids, if I'm not mistaken. I've been joking that he's going to be sleeping on the couch for a few weeks at least, because his wife, Cheryl Hines, probably best known for her role in Curb Your Enthusiasm, which was a brilliant comedy series with Larry David, and she was fantastic in it, to be fair. But she's a full-blown liberal loon, Trump hater, so got to be some tense times in that household. And then, of course, after RFK gave that speech yesterday, he went on to meet Trump at a huge rally in Glendale, Arizona. And I thought Trump really did a great job of bringing RFK up to the stage, talking about how smart he was and how long he's known Bobby Kennedy. This was Trump again, and that's pure Trump. He can go from, if you're disloyal to him or say the wrong thing or something like that, you could be on his dead to me list. But if you extend the smallest twig of an olive branch to Trump, he usually can turn things around pretty quickly. And I thought he did that pretty graciously with RFK yesterday. And to be fair, and I don't think I'm overstating it, historic moment in American politics for a Kennedy, and RFK in particular, to walk on stage with not just a Republican, but a really energetic Republican, controversial Republican. But for Bobby Kennedy to walk on stage with Donald Trump, give the speech that he gave, and then after that speech, you see Trump and RFK give each other a quick hug. It was quite a moment. So certainly this doesn't hurt the Trump campaign. How much it helps, I'm not sure. Does this push them over the edge? Not sure. But I think what's going to happen now, aside from the whole RFK bombshell and all of that, in the wake of the DNC, of the convention, my suspicion is that the bloom is going to wilt pretty rapidly on the rose with Kamala Harris, I think. So I think you're going to see poll numbers really, they'll become important now as we move forward, because there's not a whole lot of time left here between now and election. And I can certainly see a scenario where the Kamala Harris campaign kind of begins to just fold in on itself. If she does, in fact, debate Trump, yeah, it'll be a dump. But if she does, in fact, debate Trump on September 10th, I think that's the date. Again, I just don't see any other result from that is just going to be an epic fail for Kamala Harris. I mean, look, the woman is not a deep intellect. I'm sorry. She's dumb as a rock, in my opinion. I mean, every time she tries to talk about anything off script, it's just kind of jumble. It's almost like an 8th grader trying to do their book report on a book that you didn't read. I mean, they caught her the other day on the tarmac somewhere where they asked her about how she's gonna pay for this $2 or $3 trillion in giveaways that she's planning. They want to give people $25,000 down payment on a home, and Medicare and health care for illegal immigrants, and just all this stuff. And she started talking about, well, it's the return on the investment, and there will be a return on the investment, and it's all about return on investment. So she mentions return on investment like 15 times in a row, but there's no substance to her answer. I mean, it is the biggest BS reply to everything. And this is just, it's almost her trademark of, talking about community banks recently. And, the thing about community banks is they're part of the community. And in a community is really important. So the community bank being part of the community is so important to the community because it's a community. I mean, I'm sorry, painfully stupid. I mean, if this woman was not famous and you didn't know who she was, and I've said this before about like Hillary Clinton and others, these people that their personalities are so flagrantly fake. If you ran into this person at a cocktail party, you'd be telling your wife, get your coat and let's get the F out of here. I mean, painfully stupid. So I can certainly see a scenario where her campaign begins to fold in on itself. And then I can also see a scenario where we wake up in November and she's president, because this is where we are now. Nothing is predictable anymore. The only thing that's predictable about this election is the unpredictable nature of the election. They're going to manipulate it. They're going to steal it. They're going to do whatever they can. We're finding out now, if you pay attention, several states just in the last couple of weeks are now finding, I think in Virginia, they found 30,000 something votes that were illegal from 2020. People that are dead, people that aren't citizens, people that don't live there anymore, people that voted twice. Some other state, they found 80,000 votes. I mean, they actually had more votes than the population of the state. So all this haranguing of Donald Trump that was done over the last 3.5 years about stop talking about the stolen election. Well, it was stolen. It was manipulated. It was not an accurate vote count. That's just actually a fact beyond dispute at this point. But unfortunately, we're in this new realm where facts really don't matter. And if you're a Democrat and you're a Kool-Aid drinker and you're on that side of the aisle, none of this matters. None of the facts matter. The looming financial specter of a Kamala Harris presidency and what that entails and means, which for anyone with common sense understands, deep recession, depression, it could really get bad because these people have no clue. But it doesn't matter. Like pretty much half the country, it just doesn't matter. They're ideologically driven. Their positions are rooted in emotion and hatred of either Donald Trump or conservatives or traditional American values or Judeo-Christian philosophy or all of the above. But their allegiance to their party is based in emotion. It's not about policy. It's not about outcomes. And we were just talking before the show with the producer here and say, my opinions, I feel as though, have always been rooted in my own observation of any given situation, whether it's the border, illegal immigration, the economy, trying to look at it with a pragmatic viewpoint of common sense. But none of my opinions are ever rooted in an ideology to a political party. Not at all. Registered independent. I don't have an allegiance to either party or any party. My allegiance is to the country, to the future of my children and grandchildren, and that's where it ends. And I just make my opinions and judgments based on what I see, what I observe, and what I know to be, or as close as I can know to be, fact. So just a very interesting time that we're in here. And I was just reminded before we went on here of the magnificent job numbers mistake from last month. There's like 1 million jobs that was over-reported that didn't actually exist and weren't created. So all of these things that unfold, and you would think it would be kind of earth-shattering, but it's just barely a blip on the radar screen. And again, I attribute it to the fact that we're in this odd place where half the country is just driven by emotion. They don't care at all. So very interesting times that we're in here. it's going to be really interesting to see how the Trump RFK Jr. thing unfolds moving forward. I don't see a scenario where they're traveling all over the country together and RFK is at every Trump rally and all of that. You could even kind of tell Bobby Kennedy when he walked on stage in Arizona yesterday there was almost part of him in his face that, like, oh my God, I'm making a deal with the devil, or I can't believe I'm doing this. There was a reticence in his face and his body language that was, I think, somewhat telling, but I don't know. I don't know the guy personally, but you did kind of get that sense that he almost looked like he wanted to turn around and run off the stage at 1 minute. And like, what was I ever thinking? But I do think that his premise is correct about the two different parties, and that the Republican Party, or I should say the MAGA movement, whatever you want to call it, the Republican Party as Trump envisions it, is much more aligned with the Democratic Party of JFK's generation, which was, at least ostensibly, for the middle class, for the working class, etc. I also thought it was very interesting yesterday when RFK talked about his meetings with Trump, which well before any of this, there was any notion of him suspending his campaign or supporting Trump. But he did have meetings with Trump where they talked about these issues that have been near and dear to Bobby Kennedy's heart, and he's really worked his whole life on. Our food supply, the pesticides in our food, chemicals in our food, unhealthy children physically and spiritually, the obesity epidemic in this country, big pharma, big agriculture, big corporations, big media, all running everything. He made some really salient points, and I thought it was interesting where Trump said, yes, I want to bring him in and put him in charge of some of these things. And that Trump said, yeah, these are issues that we should be addressing. They fall to the back in light of everything that's more pressing in the country, like the fentanyl epidemic, the border, our military posture, the state of our military, which is quite diminished, and all these other things that are going on, the chaos in the streets, crime, the general demise of the culture in general. So there's a lot going on that logically would put things like pesticides in food or the quality of our food, even though it is arguably an important issue. When you got more important things, it just goes, down the list. That's just the way life is. If your house is on fire and you're standing there with a garden hose and you're waiting for the fire department, you're not worried about that you left ramen boiling on the stove. It's just the way it is. The house is burning down. That's priority. The ramen that might be burning on the stove inside is not a priority. That's just the way it is. But it is interesting listening to RFK talk about, and it's a fair point, how has this happened over the last 20, 30, 40 years, this rampant obesity, unhealthy children, younger people getting different types of cancers way early in life, 20, 30, 40 years old. These things are all new. I think the obesity thing is largely cultural. Go back to when I was a kid, born in 1957. Well, I grew up outside. We were outside all the time. We were climbing trees, riding bicycles, skiing, sledding. You were active. You were outside. You weren't sitting in front of TV or sitting with a phone in your hand and a bag of Cheetos and all that. So life was different, and common sense would dictate less obesity because people were active. But there's a deeper thing happening here too, spiritually, with our children, and that's all about social media, the internet, the phones. So very interesting stuff. It will be interesting to see how this unfolds. I do believe that Trump will give RFK a significant role in his administration. I think that's almost without doubt. So moving forward, we really get down to the wire here, and it's going to be interesting because some early voting in some states is actually going to begin before Kamala Harris, before the debate, and even before she has sat down and given an unscripted interview to anybody. It's just kind of unbelievable, and RFK pointed that out too. it's unfair. It's been 40-something days now since her coronation, and that's what it was. And she hasn't sat down and done an interview, even like with CNN or MSNBC, where you know it's just going to be like, they're rolling cream puffs across the table to you. And then you got Trump, on the other hand, who's out doing interviews everywhere with everybody, with the enemy in enemy territory. And even with, if you haven't seen this, you should check it out. He did an interview with Theo Vaughn a few days ago, which was just hilarious in many ways. Theo Vaughn, for those of you who don't know, he's a younger, pretty well-established stand-up comedian, very successful podcast. And Trump said that his son Barron is a big fan of Theo Vaughn. And so Barron had wanted his dad to do this thing with Theo Vaughn, which was very interesting because most of the conversation was about addiction, alcoholism. Trump really opened up about his older brother's fight with alcoholism, which ultimately took his brother's life. Trump has talked about that before. He doesn't make a secret about it. And his brother's admonitions to him about don't drink, don't smoke, don't do any of this stuff, and don't do it the first time, and then you'll never miss it. And as most people know, and Trump pointed out, he's never had a single glass of alcohol his entire life or smoked. So it's pretty interesting and mirrored against Theo Vaughn, whose whole life has been about addiction and fighting addiction and in recovery. I guess he's sober now, but there's a very funny clip in there where Theo Vaughn starts talking about cocaine. And of course, Trump doesn't quite know how to handle that. And there's no one besides Theo Vaughn that would ever pose a question to Donald Trump about snort and blow. But Trump was typically gracious about it. Oh yeah, that's kind of down and dirty, isn't it? And Theo Vaughn came back with, and he's calling Trump homie and dude and bro through the whole interview. And so Theo comes back with this thing about coke that he says, oh yeah, homie, it'll turn you into a night owl. Like you'll be on your porch all night. You'll be your own street lamp. And it's just frigging hysterical. You should really, really check it out. But to my point, this is Trump. He goes everywhere with anyone. He's gracious. Typically gracious, and mirror that against Kamala Harris, who you just know, like Joe Biden, they can't let her out because she's a disaster. And then finally, one of my other pet peeves, and I know I've mentioned this before, and I didn't watch a lot of the DNC. I mean, I just, I guess I maybe should do it as research for the show. I just can't bring myself to do it. These people are so fake and so annoying. But, one of the things that they showered Biden with his 50 years of public service. And you used to hear this a lot about Hillary Clinton, all these longtime politicians, their public service. Well, it's not public service. They took a really healthy, luxurious paycheck for all those years from the public dole. They've never signed the front of a check. And, one thing that gets overlooked, and I know I've mentioned it on the show before, but one of the things that always gets overlooked, and I actually wish Trump would mention it more, is the fact that he did not take a paycheck for his 4 years as president. I think it's $400,000 a year, not a lot of money to someone like Trump, and not a lot of money for what that job entails, but he donated his paycheck to charities the whole 4 years. So not only did Trump not enrich himself by being president, it nearly bankrupted him, and he donated his paycheck, which that, make a note, that is public service, where you bring your business acumen, your leadership skills, whatever you have to offer, you bring that to the country, you donate that to the country for the good of the country, and that is actually public service. I wish people would point that out more. It just drives me crazy when I hear these 50-year politicians talk, be heralded for their decades of public service. I mean, it's decades of hackery. And I always say, and I would say it again, give me one substantial piece of legislation that Joe Biden drafted and got over the finish line in his 50 years that was beneficial to the country, or even if it wasn't beneficial, give me one piece of legislation that he was behind. Bernie Sanders, same thing, 35 plus years, not a single piece of substantial legislation that they spearheaded and tried to push through. It's really like a large-scale picture of a government employee who comes in at 9 o'clock in the morning with their pencil and their doodle pad and spends the whole day waiting for the clock to get to 3 o'clock so they can boogie. It's that on a larger multi-decade scale. Watching the clock, putting your time in, taking your luxurious healthcare package, your retirement plan, all funded by the American taxpayer. So it is, in short, BS. So going to be lots of fascinating things now as we head down to the wire. So expect the show over the next few weeks to ramp up a little bit. We may be trying a few different things here on the show, see if we can spice it up a little bit for you. And that does not mean nudity or graphic sexual images. Although we're not ruling that out. I want to add that caveat. But yeah, we may be trying a few different things. And if nothing else, the other thing I want to get into at some point over the next few shows is because we're seeing this with Kamala Harris. And before I close, I wanted to point out, so the one thing about RFK Jr., and I'm kind of taking this at heart, or trying to, that he did the right thing. He made a statement. He said he's going to support Trump. But he did try to talk to Kamala Harris's campaign a couple of weeks ago to see if there was an in there for him. And they would not even talk to him, which is telling. But it's telling in two ways. It's telling in that RFK's first option was to try to get involved with the Harris campaign, see if there was a position there for him, the quid pro quo. I'm going to give you my support in exchange for a cabinet position, or what are you going to do for me? So that was his first move. So I could take this RFK thing two ways: an earnest rejection of the new Democratic Party and that it does not fit what his father and uncle stood for. But I can also look at it as just another political prostitution play, which is so rampant, and especially not solely, exclusively, because Republicans do this too, but it's especially rampant in the Democratic Party. Barack Obama used Joe Biden like a white male stripper whore to help him get elected by having good old average Joe that everybody loves, the older white guy, purely a usury move. And Biden knew that and accepted it, and Obama knew it. And you can see it now because I think the Obamas and the Bidens now fully hate each other. Biden and Joe Biden are rumored, and it's believable, to be seething still about Biden being jettisoned overboard like a piece of dead weight. Really, like, just pretty heartless, brutal, like a mob hit. But this is emblematic of the party. Kamala Harris willingly let herself be used as Willie Brown's under-the-desk lunchtime buffet for 30 years while he was married. So she was, Willie Brown's girlfriend, under the desk, willingly used, let herself be used. It's all about climbing a ladder. It's all about the ascent to more power and a bigger paycheck. And now I could construe an element of this with RFK to a little bit of political prostitution there. I'm not going to go so far as to where, that he's wearing a thong and pasties, but you could construe it as, this is his chance to give a big double FU to the Democratic Party by saying, I'm going to now support Trump, but I'm only going to support Trump if Trump offers me a cabinet position. So, I'm trying to be reasonable and not, like a bomb thrower, but if you look through the looking glass on this stuff, you will see very often a lot of usury. Look at Kamala Harris. A month and a half ago, they were trying to figure out how to throw her off the boat right behind Biden. Everybody knows she's inept. She did terrible when she ran for president, didn't get a single vote. she's, an absolute and utter moron. And then a month and a half later, they are reinventing her like some Shakespearean character, and that we're all supposed to forget about not only how painfully stupid she was, but the huge national effort with the media to find a way to get rid of her without upsetting the DEI boat. And now just a complete reinvention of her. So politics aside, it's absolutely stunning and fascinating to watch. I think for most of us, we should be taking notes and say, boy, if there's any way I could incorporate this into my business or personal life, that would be fantastic. But of course, the problem is the first thing you have to do to be able to engage in that is completely sell your soul to the devil. And that's what stops most people dead in their tracks. Thanks for watching the show. We'll be back with more next week. Keep the blue side up. We need it.